So thank you for everybody for joining the November coffee conversation. Like I said earlier, we've got a good topic to cover this month, and Stephanie Kegley with Messer Construction has put together a really great panel to cover a really good topic. So sit back and enjoy the conversation. Once again, if everybody could please mute themselves. We don't have that control for whatever reason today. That way we don't get any feedback during the conversation. We'll just use the chat feature for questions later in the session, so feel free to use those as you will. Our moderator today is Jennifer Evangelist. She's a Parsons Design Manager at RDU International Airport. And Stephanie Kegley, who I mentioned has put together this panel, she's going to be behind the scenes running the program. She is the Business Development Executive at Messer Construction. And with that, Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our coffee talk this morning. As Gary said, my name is Jennifer Evangelist, and currently working as owner's rep for Parsons, extension of RDU staff, and work here as a part of the project management staff. I'm happy to be here this morning, and I'm going to take a few minutes to introduce our panel members, and then we'll run through a little bit of an introduction to our topic this morning. We have 4 panel members with us today, and I'll go ahead and briefly introduce them. First one is Jeff McSwain. Jeff is the Assistant Aviation Director of Development at Charlotte Douglas International Airport. He has been there for 11 years, and Jeff is responsible for planning, design, and construction of all airport projects. And he also oversees land acquisition and the Part 150 air noise compatibility program. Second panel member this morning is Ron Jewett. Ron is the Vice President of Facility Asset Management here at RDU and my neighbor. Ron has been with the authority for about 20 years, and he oversees planning and design of and construction of airfield and roadway projects, including any terminal work, runway work, apron work, taxiways, parking lots, utilities, stormwater, any flat work here at the airport. Our third panel member this morning is Clay Pasley. Clay is president of the Pasley Management Group, which currently serves as the program manager at Nashville International Airport. Clay started PMG in 2006, following a very long career at DFW, where he led the completion of DFW's first major capital development program. And our last panel member this morning is Chris Malinowski. Chris is Operations Vice President of Messer Construction. Chris joined Messer in 1992 and has over 30 years of experience in construction. Chris and his team delivered the first construction manager at risk project at Charlotte Douglas International Airport. It's called the Plaza. He is also a member of the Lean Construction Institute and has served on the Charlotte Chamber Aviation Committee. So in the interest of time, as I mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and briefly describe each of the project delivery methods that we have selected to discuss with you today before we jump into our questions. And if you don't catch all of this, that's okay. We will follow up with a flyer via email. And as we go through our questions and our discussion, please go ahead and put any questions that you may have into the chat function, and we'll go ahead and address those when the discussion is over. So the first delivery method that is a very traditional delivery method in the most common one used in aviation today is design, bid, build. This one typically includes 2 separate contracts, one for the designer, one for the general contractor. And really the project success and cost control are really dependent on accurate design and bid documents. And we know that that's, as I said, traditional method. The 2 other methods we'd like to discuss a little bit more in depth today are progressive design build, which is a process where the owner contracts with a single firm for both design and construction, and that's typically the contractor that holds that contract. And in this method, the owner often defines the project requirements early on, and then kind of takes a step back a little bit later on during design and construction, and really relies on confidence that they've hired the right team who can deliver to meet the expectations. The last one is construction manager at risk. And with this delivery method, there are 2 separate contracts, again, one with the designer, one with the contractor. The team for this type of delivery method forms as early as possible to try and get the integration going between the design and the construction team. And at the end of the design process, the construction manager provides the owner with a guaranteed maximum price and then accepts risk to complete the project at that price. So our team will discuss a little bit more about how these all function within the aviation world. And like I said, we've prepared a number of questions for our panel. So again, if you have any questions as we go along, please put them in the chat. We'll go ahead and get those at the end. So the first question, I'm going to turn this over to Jeff and to Ron as our airport executives. First one is, can you tell us what you like about the construction manager at risk contracting method, and also provide maybe at least one drawback to this method? And I'll open it up to Jeff first.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Just double check that. All right,
good. Thank you.
Yes, as an owner, construction manager at risk, I look at it as it's one of the tools in our toolbox. We have started using that probably 7 years ago or so. And Chris and Messer were our first CM on our East Terminal Expansion Phase 2 project with a food court. The thing we like the best about the CM at risk is it's more of a partnership with our contractor. You know, and in North Carolina, if you do design bid build, you have to select the lowest responsible bidder. With CM at risk, you pick based on qualifications and the best fit for that project. But the thing we like the best about it is when projects are very logistically challenging, such as the East Terminal Phase 2 project, where we rebuilt or modified what we call the peel here at our airport, where we go from the DE connector into E-concourse. We had one up, one down escalator, a set of stairs, and an elevator. So now we have 2 down, 2 up, 2 elevators, and a set of stairs. And you know, we have, I think, I don't know the latest numbers, but you know, somewhere around 50% of our traffic goes through E-concourse. So it is very busy, and they have a lot of logistical challenges with it. And it was just easier to pick someone we thought we could have a good relationship with and work well with, like Messer, and really work on making sure that we kept our throughput through that area and that our customers had a good experience. So I'd say that's the best benefit in my mind. I'd say the drawback is you pay just a little bit of a premium sometimes for the CM at risk, but if you don't use the CM at risk, for instance, here we would have probably had to have several more project managers and more in-house staff managing that project. We only had one project manager, and we use TY Lin International as in-house expansion of staff. And Tom Barnett leads that for TY Lin here, and Stephen Williams, I think, is also on the call, was our project manager for that project. So we would have a lot more in-house staff if we did it that way. But we've really liked this method.
Thank you, Ron.
Morning, Jennifer and everybody. And Jennifer, just give me a thumbs down if you can't hear me.
We're all good.
Okay. Guess that wouldn't work very well. Hey, like Jeff, we do like to execute construction by way of the CMR method when we have a long and complicated project, particularly where there's lots of phases, when there might be some overlap. And we got started using CMR.
Okay. What is this for then?
2011 or so.
Sorry, Rob, we're getting some feedback from somebody. Can everybody please try and mute their phone during this discussion other than the presenters? Thank you.
Hey, yeah, there we go. I think that phone got muted. So I was saying, I think we started with CMR probably about 2010, 2011 with the terminal renovation project. And that reveals one of the first benefits of CMR, because there were so many unknowns in this renovation. It was a building, it was our old Terminal A. It had been built in several iterations. No one knew exactly what was behind the walls, and the CMR method gives you some flexibility with that contractor contingency, plus all the pre-bidding work that can be done by the CMR. I've always said that the CMR method for us is schedule insurance. Jeff, maybe I should back up a step. Jeff actually mentioned something very important. You know, if you've done this long enough with the traditional design bid build method, you've probably started a project with an adversarial relationship. And if not, you could have started one fairly soon. The CMR method really puts that at bay, and you can start off with a partnership, and that just creates an entirely different project for you and gives you a lot better chance for success. And success in my mind is in part is staying on schedule. And I've always called this method schedule insurance, because it gives you so much flexibility that you can work through some pretty difficult challenges that might derail a traditional project, but you can keep a CMR project on schedule. And you know, Jeff mentioned also it might cost a little bit more up front. So maybe one of the drawbacks is you have to set a little bit more cash in your budget for that kind of project, particularly where costs might come up a little bit more up front. But I think in the long run, if you did 10 traditional design bid build jobs and you did 10 CMR jobs, you probably may break even. You may even save a little money, because you've put off, avoided, and prevented a lot of changes, claims, delays, and things like that. So those are some of the reasons I think that we like the CMR method. And although it may cost a little more, we think the premium is worth it. We think it's insurance against some unknowns, schedules, delays, and things like that.
Thank you. I think that you both addressed sort of the second question I had here to ask about real world examples of how CMR benefited your project compared to other methods, which I think that you both addressed. But I know that there are recent projects at both airports that were put out for CMR versus a traditional, hard bid or design build. But there are also other smaller projects that are being delivered in a more traditional method going on at the same time. So I wonder, maybe have you seen maybe describe some of the differences between the two in the same projects that are going on right now, or the reasons that you considered one job for one versus the other? Is it strictly because they're smaller, or is it different financing or something like that? I know I'm calling a little bit of an audible that wasn't on the list, but you addressed the first couple so quickly. I thought let's jump into something else that might be helpful.
Jeff, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go. You're right. We sit down. Jack Christine is my direct supervisor here at Charlotte Douglas. So Jack, myself, my partner Mark Whipke, who's the planning director, Tom Barnett with TYLM is an extension of staff, and then my airport engineer Ashton Watson. We kind of sit down as a group before we decide on delivery method and just discuss the pros and cons. And the city of Charlotte also has a policy for how we do the CMR delivery method. So we put a letter in the file saying why we picked that method and for what reasons to justify that. But like I said earlier, the biggest reason is usually logistics. Our terminal lobby expansion project that's going on right now, that is a joint venture with Holder, Edison Ford, and RJ Leeper, is our CM on that project. And we picked that because, for one, it's the largest single contract the city of Charlotte's ever done before. A little over $500 million in contract there. But we're tearing the front door. Just look at it as your house. We're tearing the front door out, and we're still going in and out the front door every day. So we have 4 doors there that we're shifting around, and we're closing 2 at a time for the different phases. And our big concern there was the throughput through our security checkpoints. We wanted to make sure we never went down on the throughput in our security checkpoints. So our design team, who Gresham Smith is partners, is our lead designer there. And again, Holder, Edison Ford, and Leeper are our CM. It's a big partnership. We modeled the throughput there. And one of the things we did, and that's a big part of the CM job as well, is writing your contract documents to make sure you have all this addressed. But we never wanted to hurt our operation or lower our throughput through those checkpoints. Very important to us. So we're maintaining that, and we always wanted to at least get maintain it or get better for every phase of construction. So that was the main reason we picked it for that. So that's a real world example. We still do design, bid, build on all of our airfield projects and our smaller projects, vertical projects that's maybe more on its own type thing and doesn't affect our passengers or our partners as much. So there's the thought process we go through there, and I'll turn it over to Ron now.
Yeah, Jeff, I can build on that just a little bit. You know, you and I both follow North Carolina statutes for selecting and executing, selecting CMRs and executing this kind of work. And the Airport Authority here has a policy set around that as well. And there's actually a twist to that. If you apply FAA money, and you've got to actually include cost as a selection factor, that's a whole different topic. But we're doing a little bit of that. I don't want to say we were on the bleeding edge, but we've also used CMR method a little bit on horizontal work. We had a glut of projects to come through a few years ago, and so we selected a CMR for vertical work and a CMR for flat work, which included some airfield projects, and then we had a landside bundle of projects that included road and parking lot renovations and signs and things like that. And North Carolina is very I would say clear on their statute. You have to have a specific reason, as Jeff mentioned, and a specific project to select a CMR for. So we had to list specific projects, even though we bundled them together. And so we did go out and execute some airfield projects that way. We did the landside projects that I mentioned. And, you know, actually in thinking about that, one of the drawbacks to Jennifer, part B of your first question, we did run into a case where we took bids on the elements of the work, and we attempted to negotiate the GMP with the CMR, and we could not reach terms. And so there is one potential drawback. I think hopefully that's unique, maybe a little bit unusual that you can't go forward from that point, but you lose a lot of time when that happens. You've got to really draw back, put your bid documents together and bid it out again. So there's one potential drawback, but all in all, it's worked out for coordination for us. Jeff mentioned a project. I'll mention one where we're getting ready to embark on a program to build a new runway at RDU to replace an existing 10,000 foot runway. And of course, that project has many different elements. We've got to relocate a road. We've got a lot of embankment and drainage. We've got security things. We've got all that paving, and we've got to reinvent the existing runway as a parallel taxiway. And so it's a number of different project elements over a number of years. And so the CMR method allows us to put those together and bid them out at the right time. And a lot of people describe progressive design build this way. And so there's some overlap there, I think. But it allows us not only to package the bundles in a way that work towards the quality and schedule, but it also allows us to bring DBE subs on, their attention to the project a little early. It gives us a chance to get that DBE participation where it needs to be. And it gives us a chance to align bidding the jobs with the funding stream that we experience along the way. So there's another element of that I probably didn't think to bring up in the past question, but I hope that answers some of your question, Jennifer.
It does, absolutely. I just wanted to give our team a little bit more information about what's going on with some of these bigger projects at the airports and how you guys evaluate what goes out on the street and what the local community sees. So that's very helpful. Thank you. The next question I will put to Clay. And as I said earlier, Clay primarily works with Nashville. And so I'm going to put this one out there. So B&A has recently used the progressive design build delivery method on several large capital projects. And so I was hoping that you could describe a little bit more about why this is a preferred contracting method at Nashville for these projects.
Sure, love to. Thank you, Jennifer. And
thank you.
Good morning to everyone. I see a few familiar faces and some familiar names, so good to see everybody. But yes, we started working with Nashville when they were in their visioning process for their new program that's well underway now. And part of what we do at Pesley Management Group when we're working with a client is to sit down with them and really understand what their project execution goals are. Whether that's schedule issues or cost containment or risk transfer, or what are those key things that are particular to that particular job? What are their constraints? Jeff and Ron mentioned some statutory constraints sometimes you're faced with, or maybe regulatory constraints you're faced with, and also kind of what are their capabilities. And then we try to go through an analytical process with them to find that delivery method that best matches their particular situation and what they're trying to accomplish. If you look at the historical data associated with delivery methods, they all tend to have, certain attributes. Some delivery methods historically have a higher percentage of change of cost increase. Some delivery methods have a higher degree of schedule growth. As Ron and Jeff mentioned, some have better schedule control. So each delivery method, if you're looking at it from a historical standpoint, tend to have certain attributes. So you're trying to match those attributes up with, again, what is the goal or the objectives for that project's execution? And in the case of Nashville, they were under, their growth was just unbelievable. They were going through the roof. And they couldn't build gates fast enough. So their number one priority was schedule. We need to get these gates built as fast as we can. Secondly, given the magnitude of what they were doing within their existing facilities, they were very focused on design risk transfer. So they had another 4 or 5 kind of key issues, but those two alone drove kind of a delivery method direction. The risk transfer says, okay, you're going to do a design build delivery method. Now, design build, there's probably 8 or 9 different ways to do design build. So it's kind of a little bit of a, the Baskin and Robbins ice cream, which flavor do you want? There's not just one design build scenario. But given the fact that the design build addressed their risk transfer need, and design build is probably, of the ones we're talking about today, the only one that truly does transfer risk. And then secondly, given their speed need, that's when you got into the progressive design build. The progressive design build allows the owner to have the packages bid out as they're ready. So you can develop the foundation package and you can go ahead and get that built out and get it under construction while you're working on the next package. So a typical project may have 4 or 5 packages: a foundation, a structural, a skin, an MEP, interior finish out, kind of a thing. So it allows design to be occurring while you're actually out there in the field building the project that you're ultimately going to complete. So those 2 fundamental issues for Nashville, and again, every airport's different, every project's different. Like Jeff and Ron was mentioning, each project needs to be evaluated because one size does not necessarily fit all. It really depends on what the issues or the objectives are for that particular project and what the context is that you're trying to accomplish it in. So they use the progressive design build. Some of the kind of, I guess, the negative side, again, there is no perfect delivery method. They all have their challenges. Part of the issue is you really don't have a full guaranteed maximum price until that very last package is issued. You got a budget when you start out, you're working towards a budget from a design standpoint, but the reality of it is, from an owner's standpoint, until I let that very last package, only then do I have a final GMP. Now you progressively have a GMP as you go. As each package is let, you have a GMP, if you will, for that scope of work, which collectively builds up to that final GMP. So in some situations, things evolve, things change. So that you may experience kind of growth in your project or whatever as you go. which sometimes drives the cost up. Sometimes it doesn't. It really just depends on what the situation is. So again, in Nashville's case, again, looking back at the historical attributes of delivery methods to achieve their particular goals of how quickly can I deliver these gates and how can I ensure I've got good risk transfer. A progressive design build delivery method was the delivery method that best matched their particular situation.
Okay, and as a follow-up, have you experienced any particular challenges or barriers with this delivery method in Nashville? And as you were speaking, things popped into my mind like scope gap or cost control, and I think you touched on some of those a little bit. But how do you overcome the project is moving so quickly?
Well, again, it's a bit of a trade-off. What's more important to you, schedule or cost control or design control or those kind of things. And I would submit to you, a lot of times people feel like, well, if I do design build, I'm giving up design control. Well, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, quite frankly, you can make a design build delivery method look like a design bid build if you want to. I mean, we've got a two-step process that we've put in place at other airports where you literally only authorize you select a design build team, but you only authorize the task for design and carry that design as far as you want to carry it to get everything flushed out as you want. Then you go to bid. So you can structure a design build delivery method just about any way you want it. Again, given what your objectives are and your capabilities. But as I mentioned on the progressive design build, cost tends to be one of those things that sometimes grows.
Down there's no line.
I already got mine. Do I need two?
Can everybody please mute their phones while we're presenting? Thank you.
I'm going to be able to get flu shots next year. I'm going to be on the city's plane.
Hey, Mark.
It's a lot cheaper.
If everybody can please
Both of
put
us.
their phones on mute, we'd appreciate it.
Wish I heard more this time around.
Did you just get it?
Just now, yeah. There's no line, so.
Yeah, I got mine at, hold on, let me make sure I'm muted.
Hello, we're limited in time. Thank you.
I do hope you get that flu shot though. So anyway, I may have lost your question there, but a lot of times as the packages grow, cost will grow. And a lot of that is not so much driven by eras. It's you're starting so early in the process. As the design evolves, as the owner knows more, things change, things evolve. As you learn more, you're going to know more tomorrow than you did today, kind of an issue. So a lot of times you'll see the cost grow. But if you look at it historically, the percentage of cost growth in a design build delivery method is much less than many other delivery methods, just historically. So again, every place is unique, every situation is unique, they're all different. But really just matching up that delivery method to that particular situation is probably the best way, almost kind of to customize that delivery method based on that owner's particular challenges, particular capabilities, and what their key objectives are in terms of the project is key.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, I will turn this question over to Chris Malinowski of Messer Construction. Chris, you've worked both with CMR delivery and lump sum delivery methods in airports. Can you please tell us a little bit more about your experience with both and if one is preferred over the other?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perspective?
Yeah, you can hear me okay, Jennifer?
Yes.
All right, great. So good morning, everybody. So it's funny, as I was kind of putting together my talking points here, I really had not coordinated on what the answers and talking points are going to be for our other presenters, but a lot of what I put together, I think will probably mirror what we've heard from Clay, Jeff, and our other speakers here, Ron. So let me pull this up here. Bear with me. So over the last 7 or 8 years, we've been working over at CLT, and we've worked under both the lump sum contracting method as well as the CM at risk method. Most recently, we completed the East Terminal Phase 2 project, also known as the Plaza project. That was a CMR at risk project. And then currently we're in pre-construction on the FIS Concourse D renovation project. At the same time that we were doing the East Terminal Phase 2 project, we were also working under a lump sum contract on Concourse B. So, it's kind of interesting. We were wearing, 2 different hats on 2 different projects simultaneously at the airport. And I think for me, the way I manage my projects, I really don't allow the contract to dictate how I treat my client or how I interact with my client. But not every company and not every individual is going to approach their projects that way. So, as I put my thoughts together on this, I tried to just look at it from the industry as a whole. And definitely for me, as our other speakers mentioned, the smaller or less complex projects definitely for me tend to make more sense to be a traditional lump sum approach. Things where you need to pull together a project fairly quickly. Definitely with the lump sum approach, you can usually move a little bit faster from the aspect of the owner getting things moving. Especially if it's a smaller project, less planning needed. The nature of the project, may not require so much builder input. In those cases, the design team or even the in-house experience of the airport, they might be able to put together the logistics plan, put together the phasing plan, if there even needs to be a phasing plan on those size projects. And, working hours, those types of things, as long as the airport in question has the ability to handle all that internally, there really isn't a big need to include a CM at risk right up front on that project. They can definitely go with a traditional lump sum approach. Cost was mentioned, and definitely there is a perception that if cost is your number one driver, there is a perception that lump sum is going to give you your best price. And on a smaller project, that very well may be the case. And this is definitely an intangible. You never build the same project twice. Even if they're very similar, they're going to be different. So it is very difficult to judge how would this have gone if it was lump sum versus CM at risk. I guess we'll never really know that answer, but on smaller projects where you can set aside the appropriate contingencies or allowances to deal with risk, there probably is no reason why you shouldn't go lump sum on it if you've got the ability to manage it in-house. I think several of our airports here on the call, they all mentioned, their own project managers. So, I know CLT, they've got a large staff of project managers available to help manage their projects, but not every airport has that. So, if you're very light on in-house management, a CM at risk is definitely going to be able to maybe help you act as your manager for you. I mean, that's ultimately what you're hiring the CM for. They should be your advocate and they should be looking out for your best interests. Whereas if you go lump sum, that may not be what you end up with. So on the Concourse B project, I'll give an example. We did that renovation with CLT a few years ago, and by no means was it an easy project. It wasn't necessarily a small project. I think it was around, when it was all said and done, it was probably around $13–14 million. But for CLT, that is not a giant project. The phasing, while it was a phased project, the phasing was very much in line with other renovations that they performed over the years. So the in-house, they had their ability to really put together a really solid construction plan, logistics plan, and be able to put that out to bid. They were able to identify where the risks lied, all the unforeseen conditions, and they were able to put together a series of unit rates and allowances in their bidding package that TY Lin helped them prepare. So they were able to manage all of that very successfully in-house. There was really no reason why Jeff and his team couldn't put a project like that out lump sum and get very good results. So that was a great example of where you could utilize lump sum in a fairly complex process where your existing processes were able to really handle that internally. Now, for a smaller airport, they may not be comfortable doing all that. They might have wanted to have done that type of a project under CM at risk. Several people did make a comment about, lump sum at risk, really kind of, there are no qualifications typically. The qualification is, can the low bidder provide a bond? So, not every airport may want to kind of put their partner up at risk like that. They're going to end up with whoever they end up with. So one of the benefits going with CM at risk is definitely the ability to select your construction manager, your partner on the project in more of a qualifications-based environment, looking at their experience, looking at that team before they make that decision. Probably everybody on this call, I'm sure, has been involved with complex construction projects. And I guarantee you that if you had a project where you had a really great team involved in it, most likely that project was very successful. It's pretty rare where you would say, yeah, we had a great team, but the project went poorly. So you definitely get a leg up on being able to ensure your success if you do go the CM at risk route, in my opinion. You get rid of the potential to be working with somebody that maybe really doesn't have the right to be out there working in an aviation environment, especially if they've never done that before. And if they can bond it, that is who you might end up with. So on the more complex projects, like the Plaza project, like the project that we're doing with Pat Hargrove and his team on the FIS Concourse D project, CLT did elect to go CM at risk there, and some of the reasons that they've selected that, and these are typical with what we would see when a client decides to go CM at risk, just early integration of design and construction teams, building that team early, getting your builder involved in constructability reviews, I think is really important. Utilizing like BIM modeling, going through all that conflict resolution with the documents before they go out to bid. Yeah, you might feel like you're paying a little bit more selecting that CM, but gosh, the things that you can find through the constructability reviews and all that conflict resolution before you put it out to bid in a lump sum environment, all those items, if they're not caught early, could then become change orders. So through the CM at risk process, we're able to kind of get out ahead of that, help drive down the number of change orders. Estimates should be able to be a lot more highly accurate when you have your builder involved up front. And then I know Jeff mentioned logistics. If you have a really complex logistical project, getting that builder's input early in the project around logistics, things like phasing. I think the FISD project that we're working on right now, that job, when it's all said and done, we'll probably have upwards of 20 phases. That would be very difficult for a client to come up with that and then be able to really sell that to a market to bid it lump sum without them being involved in all that planning and development of that plan. I think subcontractor pre-qualification, just like in CM at risk, you can qualify who your CM is going to be. You also get the ability for your CM to do subcontractor pre-qualification on these really large, complex projects. You're spending potentially hundreds of millions of dollars on projects, or if you're a smaller airport, you might be spending a lot less than that, but the dollar amount is just as important to you because you don't spend a lot of money annually in construction. You can make sure that the subcontractors that are bidding on this project are actually capable of doing this complex work. So doesn't mean that you're going to, only use expensive contractors. There's lots of high quality firms that are capable of getting low on bid day. You just want to make sure you kind of weed out those individuals that really don't have a right to be, they don't have the technical experience to be out working on some of these scopes of work. You can try to limit that through the subcontractor pre-qualifications. And then lastly, right now, the marketplace for materials and labor, it's crazy. Anybody that's been bidding work recently or just watching the news, that this is a real issue in the industry. Getting a CM on board early, you can really help try to put a plan in place to manage all of that. If you're going to bid out your projects today, like you did three years ago, you're probably going to have some major surprises in your bidding process or in the execution of your project if you don't get out ahead of it. We talked about money. We talked about kind of the perceived premium of CM at risk. I would agree. I think it might have been Clay that was talking about, you did 10 projects and you lined them up at the end of the day, you're probably really not paying any more for it. And I would agree with that. If you got a good CM and they're out there finding ways to save you money during pre-construction, if they're being creative and solving problems when they do come up during construction, I really do think that you can break even. Even if you don't break even, I mean, you're going to have a much better construction experience. Your schedule will probably be better. Your quality and your safety will probably be better because you've brought on board a better building from day one.
Thanks, Chris. I see a bunch of our questions are popping up, and one of them actually does kind of deal with that about involving the CMR in the process. So one of the questions here is, how does CMR delivery method impact planning, which is what you've been going into? And then when do you bring the CMR into the process on a project? I know we'd like it earlier than not. Oftentimes it's later. So what have you seen and how does that happen?
Yeah, sure. So, like with Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools, they're another one of my clients. They bring the CM on board immediately after they hire the design team. So really we're on board as soon as design starts. We're there day one. Speaking for Jeff, CLT oftentimes like to get down the road just a little bit with their design team before they bring their CMs on board. And I think, as long as you have a good approach as to why and when you're bringing your CM on board, what you want to get out of them, what your own in-house capabilities may or may not be, you can definitely wait a little while to bring your CM on board. I do agree with you, Jennifer. I like to be involved from day one. It just helps me understand kind of the history, how we got to where we're at, why the decisions were made. And it helps save us some time from getting kind of caught up with things. But you don't have to do it day one. And CLT has been very successful. And Jeff, I don't know, is there some logic you can provide why you guys wait a little while?
Well, there's a lot of different circumstances that go into that. But, you nailed it. In one aspect, we do have a lot of staff here, and Tom Barnett and myself, we pretty much know how we want to build something and phase it for the most part before we go into something. But it's just depending on the project and the circumstances when we'll bring them on. But definitely before you get heavy into the design, so I'd say at least around the 30 to 40% design. Ideally, the first project we did was with you guys. It was pretty much at the end, but we knew how we wanted to build that project, and I think it turned out okay. But ideally, you do want to get them in a little bit earlier. But it's got a lot to do with the owner. How much ability do you have and your staff have to do some of that stuff up front before you bring somebody on? If you don't have much experience, then I agree with you. You would want to bring them on as early as possible if you don't have much in-house experience.
Thank you. So I'm going to jump right into here. We have quite a few questions. Here's one. and I'll turn this maybe to Ron, possibly to Jeff. Does the FAA allow CMR as a delivery method on federally funded projects?
Yes, they do. But each one has to be approved individually. And I can tell you from experience that the FAA requires a substantial justification for using the CMR delivery method. And I can think of at least one case where they agreed with using the CMR delivery method, but they didn't want to participate in the fee that the airport pays for the CMR. They just sort of feel like that's an unwarranted premium, at least in my experience. But I know other airports like there's one out west, it escapes me right now, is using a CMR for a runway program, and we got some experience from them just talking with them. It's always good to talk to somebody that's done it before, and you can approach the FAA with that analogy. That gives you a good starting point.
Thank you. And so the next question here is, how do you set up a CMR to function as an owner PM? How do you avoid conflicts like payment approval requests and approval of change orders? And I'll put that out to the team.
I'll take a go at it, and then maybe if Ron wants to follow up. But when we do see him at risk, we do have an in-house consultant that does the PM for us on that, which is T.Y. Lynn. But all the approval processes of money has to come through me or the airport engineer. So in-house airport employees have to approve all of that. T.Y. Lynn does a great job of getting everything together and reviewing it, telling us any concerns they have and stuff like that. But when it comes time to approve a change order or a payout, we have to sign off on it. Now, change orders that we do here, we have a governance process that we go through, and that's a whole different probably coffee talk to get into our governance process here at the airport. But it's something we just recently set up in the last couple of years. So we have committees. We have a construction committee that reviews and signs off on change orders. So I won't get into the weeds on that, but I'd be glad to talk offline to anybody that wanted to talk more about it. But it's a process that we go through, and it just kind of ensures that everybody here gets eyes on stuff before it gets approved.
Unlike Charlotte, we have a pretty small staff. I have 2 engineers that answer to me, but we have a lot of on-call design consultants, some of which are on the call. And Jennifer actually works with Parsons, and they're part of our staff. They're an extension of staff. So, but like Jeff, all of those payments and change orders roll up through airport authority staff. That's we manage things that way. And I'm sure everybody's a little bit different.
Great, thank you. And here's one last question. If anybody has anything else, please go ahead and enter it in. I know we're kind of running tight on time, but we'll get to what we can. The last one I see here is, have any of the panelists used the CMGC delivery approach?
Can I?
Yeah, we've used that before. I mean, it's very similar though to a CM at risk delivery method. I mean, you're just bringing the contractor on early and then contracting out the trades through them. Now, another kind of unique scenario, and this may relate back maybe to the previous question, in Pennsylvania, they have a Separations Act that's been in place since 1923 that requires the owner to bid out as prime contracts the major trades. So they have to bid out as a prime contract, mechanical, electrical, structural, and I forget what else. So their delivery strategy there is, and they've developed it, over the years. Like I said, this has been in place since 1923. They have CM agency that is then managing all of these prime trade contracts that the owner was required to bid out per statute. So in that scenario, you've got kind of you've got a CM, although it's really CM agency, they're not at risk for anything per se, that is managing these prime contracts that the owner holds the paper on. So that's a little bit different scenario. And again, it's back to the, what are your constraints? That's a state statute that, if you do work in Pennsylvania, you have to figure out how to live with. So I don't know if that kind of goes to the question or not, but that's a scenario where you've got a CM managing prime trade contracts on behalf of the owner, as opposed to a general contractor kind of scenario.
Excellent, thank you. So I know, like I said, we're running a little low on time, and there may be others with other questions out there. If you have any questions or want to know what the best way to educate others at your airport about design build or construction manager at risk processes, you can have them join more invitations like this, more discussions. You can also connect with the Southeast Conference of AAAE for all the partners for a resource. There is also the Progressive Design Build Institute as a resource. And there's research that you can do for federal, state, and local regulations and guidelines. And if you have other questions, we're going to go ahead and send out, as I said, a flyer with what we discussed here today. And this conversation is being recorded and will be available to viewers. And with that, since I know we're running up on an hour here, I'd like to thank all of our panelists for their time today, and thank our audience for their time today, and turn everything back over to Gary for some summary. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Jennifer. Boy, that was a lot to absorb. Good discussion. And thanks to Messer for putting this together. And thanks for all the panelists for joining and being such a big part in this education for everybody. Like Jennifer said, it was a lot to absorb, and there will be a quick reference guide that will be sent out with the pros and cons. And the additional follow-up that's available through the SEC or other outlets that Jennifer mentioned. Before we get off the phone, I also want to remind everyone to be on the lookout for the December session, which is being sponsored by Recondo. So please be on the lookout for that. And at this point, we can turn it over to everybody to finish up the rest of the day. But thank you very much for joining today.